6 Australians, surrounded, outnumbered, more than 15 to 1. The air is thick, so humid you can taste it. Insects swarm in clouds. The stench of cordite hangs like fog. And in the tree line, something moves. This is not a story of survival. It is a story of defiance. For 38 minutes, these 6 men did what no one believed possible. They weren't heroes when they woke up that morning. They were apprentices, farmers, mechanics, boys who'd grown up fixing tractors and shooting rabbits in the scrub. One had worked in a steel mill in Newcastle. Another had been a jackaroo on a cattle station in Queensland. A third had spent his teenage years helping his father repair engines in a garage that smelled of grease and petrol. These were the men Australia sent to Vietnam, not because they were exceptional, but because they were ordinary. And in that ordinariness lay something the enemy would never understand. But they'd been trained differently than most soldiers. The Australians had a reputation in Viet Cong province, slow to anger, impossible to shake, and absolutely lethal in small groups. While American units often operated in company or battalion strength, the Australians perfected the art of the small patrol. 4 men, 6 men, 8 at most. They moved through the jungle like ghosts, and when they hit hard. Their training focused on things other armies overlooked. Bushcraft, the ability to read terrain, to move through dense vegetation without making a sound, to disappear into landscape that offered no obvious concealment. Fire discipline so tight, you could go an entire 3-day patrol without hearing a shot unless contact was made. Ambush doctrine that turned 6 men into a nightmare that materialized from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. The training cadre back in Australia had been ruthless. Night movements through swampland, live fire exercises where mistakes meant real consequences. Forced marches in full kit through the bush in summer heat that rivaled anything Vietnam could offer. They learned to think like hunters, patient, observant, economical with movement and ammunition. They learned that noise discipline could mean the difference between ambushing the enemy and walking into an ambush. They learned that 6 well-trained men with clear heads and iron discipline were worth 30 who panicked and sprayed bullets at shadows. And they learned something else, something that couldn't be taught in any manual: mateship. The absolute, unshakable trust that the man next to you would never leave you behind. That if you went down, they'd come for you. That if it came down to it, they'd die before they'd abandon you. This wasn't sentiment. It was bedrock reality. It was May 1967, deep in the wet season. The patrol had been routine until it wasn't. They were operating near the edge of a rubber plantation in Viet Cong province, moving along a suspected Viet Cong infiltration route that intelligence had flagged 3 days earlier. The rubber trees stood in neat rows, their trunks pale and ghost-like in the filtered light. Between the plantation and the jungle proper lay a transitional zone, thick undergrowth, scattered palms, ground that turned to soup when it rained. Intelligence suggested VC movement in the area, but intelligence was always suggesting something. Reports came in daily. Enemy sighted here, tracks found there. Locals acting nervous in this village or that hamlet. Most of it led nowhere. But you treated every patrol like it was the one that mattered, because eventually, one of them would be. The afternoon heat pressed down like a physical weight. Cicadas screamed in the canopy, a sound so constant it became a kind of silence, the baseline against which all other sounds were measured. The patrol moved slowly, carefully, each man watching his arc, each man aware of the others through peripheral vision and occasional hand signals. Then the patrol fragmented. The exact sequence would be debated later. Some said it was a deliberate flanking maneuver gone wrong. Others claimed it was miscommunication at a critical junction. Still others insisted it was just bad luck and worse timing. However it happened, 6 men found themselves isolated, cut off from the main force with several kilometers of hostile jungle between them and safety. They'd been moving along the eastern edge of the rubber plantation when contact was made elsewhere, gunfire erupting perhaps a kilometer to the north. The patrol commander had made a decision. Split the force, investigate, regroup at a predetermined location. But the VC had other plans, and they weren't alone. The Viet Cong company moving through the area was experienced. These weren't local guerrillas armed with old French rifles and homemade grenades. This was a main force unit, the 274th Regiment, battle-hardened veterans who'd been fighting for years. They knew this terrain better than they knew their own faces. Every trail, every creek bed, every piece of dead ground that offered concealment. They'd fought the French here in the 50s, learned the hard lessons of jungle warfare, adapted and survived. They'd seen what the Americans did, the overwhelming firepower, the helicopter assaults, the artillery that turned entire grid squares into moonscapes. They'd learned to counter it, disperse, move at night, strike fast and withdraw faster, never give the enemy a target worth hitting with their big guns. But the Australians were different. The VC had learned this the hard way over the past year. The Australians didn't announce their presence with bombing runs and loudspeaker propaganda. They didn't sweep through villages in battalion strength, questioning everyone and searching every hut. They moved quietly. They watched. They waited. And when they struck, it was precise and devastating. The VC company, somewhere between 80 and 100 men, the exact number would never be confirmed, was moving south through the area when their scouts made contact with the isolated Australian patrol. From the VC perspective, this was an opportunity. 6 enemy soldiers, separated from support, in terrain the VC knew intimately. Standard tactics dictated a quick envelopment and annihilation. Send elements to block withdrawal routes. Pin them with fire from the front, close in from the flanks. It should take 15 minutes, maybe 20. The VC company commander, a man who'd been fighting since he was 16, who'd survived French napalm and American artillery, gave the orders. His men moved into position with the confidence of professionals who'd done this before. They had every advantage: numbers, position, familiarity with the ground, local support, or at least local indifference, supply caches within easy reach, escape routes mapped and memorized. They thought this would be over quickly. They were wrong. The first gunshot is a crack that splits the world in half. No warning, no buildup, no moment of mutual recognition where both sides size each other up. Just sudden, brutal contact the universe, rearranging itself in the space between one heartbeat and the next. The Australians hit the ground as one trained reflex, no thought required. They're prone before the echo fades, rifles already finding arcs of fire, bodies instinctively seeking whatever cover exists. A slight depression in the earth, the base of a rubber tree, a fallen log half-rotted and crawling with ants. In the first 3 seconds of contact, these men are already fighting from the best positions available within their immediate vicinity. No shouting, no panic. Communication happens in glances, and hand signals a flick of 2 fingers means 2 targets. 10 o'clock. A closed fist means hold fire. An open palm means shifting position. They've done this in training so many times that words are unnecessary, and words mean noise, and noise means giving away positions. Controlled bursts, 2 rounds, 3 rounds, then silence, listening, watching for muzzle flashes, for movement, for anything that indicates where the enemy is and where they're going. This shocks the VC. Most soldiers fire wildly when ambushed. Most soldiers empty entire magazines in the first few seconds. Adrenaline overriding training, fear overriding discipline. Most soldiers scream orders, warnings, curses, prayers. These 6 do neither. They fire with mechanical precision, short bursts that conserve ammunition and maintain accuracy, and between bursts, they're silent as stones. The VC scouts who initiated contact expected return fire. They expected chaos. What they didn't expect was this: disciplined, accurate fire coming from positions that seem to shift and multiply, creating the acoustic impression of a much larger force. But the tactical problem is immediate and obvious to anyone who understands infantry combat. 6 men. Minimal cover, nothing that will stop an AK-47 round, just concealment and the slight protection offered by trees and terrain. The VC are already moving to envelop them, forming a horseshoe that will collapse into a killing circle. Standard tactics. Well executed. Fire from the front to fix the enemy in place, then sweep in from the flanks to finish it. And ammunition is finite. Each man carries perhaps 7 or 8 magazines, 20 rounds each for the L1A1 SLR, the Australian issue battle rifle. That's maybe 160 rounds per man. 1,000 rounds total. Sounds like a lot until you're on the receiving end of a company-sized assault. Then it's nothing. Every magazine counts. Every shot has to matter. The radio crackles static, fragments of words, the distortion that happens when terrain and distance conspire against communication. One of the soldiers keys the handset, speaks quickly and quietly, gives their approximate position and the situation. The response is broken, unintelligible. They might get through. They might not. They try again. Same result. Remended. That's remended. Then, one of the soldiers, the one who'd worked on the cattle station, who'd spent years in the outback where the nearest help was hours away, feels sweat burn his eyes, salt and grime and fear. Mud slick under his elbows, soaking through his uniform, the wet earth smell mixing with cordite and gun oil. A leech crawling across his boot. Fat and dark, no time to deal with it now. That's a later problem, if there is a later. Spent brass bounces off his forearm, still hot enough to sting through the fabric of his sleeve. The metallic clink as it hits the ground. The smell of gun oil evaporating in the heat. That distinctive scent that every soldier knows, that stays in your nostrils long after you've cleaned your weapon. The stench of cordite acrid, chemical in his nose, his mouth, his lungs with every breath. Another soldier, the one from Newcastle, the steel mill worker, registers the weight of his rifle, the familiar heft that's become an extension of his body after months in country. His finger rests on the trigger, not in the guard. Professional habit, even in the middle of a firefight. He tracks movement in his peripheral vision, doesn't turn his head, doesn't give away that he's seen it, waits for the target to present itself fully. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. There, a flash of dark clothing against green foliage. He fires. 2 rounds. Center mass. The target drops. This is real. This is happening. And they're not going anywhere. The first VC wave comes in cautious, probing, fire, testing for response, trying to determine exactly what they're facing. 3 or 4 rifles open up from the tree line, firing in short bursts, walking rounds across the Australian's position. Leaves explode. Bark splinters. A round snaps past so close one soldier feels the pressure wave against his cheek. The Australians give them nothing except precise, aimed shots when targets present themselves. No wasted ammunition. No spray and pray. No firing at sounds or shadows. Just quiet professionalism that creates an illusion. 6 rifles, firing with discipline, and from shifting positions, sound like a much larger force. The acoustic signature suggests a full section, maybe more. The accuracy suggests experienced troops who know exactly what they're doing. After the first exchange, maybe 90 seconds, though time has already started to behave strangely, stretching and compressing in ways that will make after-action reports difficult the Australians reposition. Not all at once. One man moves while the others provide cover. 3 meters back, 4 meters left, changing the angle, creating overlapping fields of fire so that any approach to one position exposes the attacker to fire from another. It's doctrine drilled into muscle memory during those brutal training exercises back in Australia. Never let the enemy fix your exact position. Fire from one spot, they'll put artillery or mortars on it. Fire from one spot too long, they'll flank it. Always be moving, always be thinking 2 steps ahead, always fight from an unexpected angle. The movement is textbook. Low crawl, rifle cradled in elbows, using every inch of available cover. The ground is wet, muddy, and the crawl is slow and exhausting. But it's necessary. It keeps them alive. The VC become confused. The volume of return fire suggests a full platoon, 30 men, maybe more. The accuracy suggests something worse. Professionals, not conscripts. Not the kind of enemy you can simply overwhelm with numbers and aggression. Fire discipline this tight usually means either special forces or very experienced infantry. Inexperienced elements in the VC company hesitate. They've been told the Australians are dangerous, but they're also supposed to be few in number, supposedly easier to handle than the Americans with their endless helicopters and artillery support. But this doesn't match the briefing. This feels wrong. Australian discipline breaks their tempo. The VC company commander, listening to reports from his squad leaders, trying to piece together what's happening, makes a decision. Increase pressure. Commit more men. Overwhelm them before they can be reinforced. The Australians continue their pattern. Shoot and scoot. Fire in pairs. One man up, one man moving. Never both exposed simultaneously. Rotate positions so rifle barrels have time to cool. The L1A1 SLR is a superb weapon, accurate and reliable, but sustained fire will heat the barrel until accuracy degrades and the weapon becomes dangerous to the shooter, so they pace themselves. Controlled bursts, aimed shots, movement, small things, professional things, things that keep men alive. One soldier, the mechanic, the one who'd spent his youth taking engines apart and putting them back together, notices his rifle's bolt starting to drag slightly. Carbon buildup, heat expansion, the inevitable consequence of sustained fire in humid conditions. He doesn't panic. During a brief lull, he does a quick field strip of the bolt carrier, wipes it with a cloth that's already filthy, applies a tiny amount of oil from the small bottle in his webbing. 30 seconds, back in action. The kind of maintenance that becomes automatic after months of living with your weapon. The second wave is heavier, much heavier. RPGs streak through the canopy, the distinctive whoosh crack of the rocket-propelled grenades, followed by explosions that shake the ground and fill the air with flying debris. One detonates against a rubber tree 10 meters away. The tree trunk explodes in a shower of white pulp and splinters. The concussion wave hits like a physical blow. RPD machine guns open up long, chattering bursts that sound different from AK-47 fire, deeper and more sustained. The 7.62 rounds tear through the rubber trees, punching fist-sized holes through trunks, sending bark exploding outward like shrapnel. A branch directly above one soldier's head detonates not from a direct hit, but from the sheer volume of fire sawing through it. He feels the shock wave compress his ribs, an instant of pressure that drives the air from his lungs. Leaves rain down, smoking and torn, still green vegetation shredded into confetti. The noise is overwhelming, not just loud, physically oppressive. The kind of noise you feel in your chest, cavity, in your teeth, in the hollow spaces of your skull. The kind of noise that makes thinking difficult and communication nearly impossible. Then one of the Australians gets hit. The round catches him in the shoulder, a through and through that misses bone but tears through muscle. He grunts, not a scream, not even really a shout, just a sound of surprise and pain. The kind of sound you make when you've been punched hard and unexpectedly. He rolls onto his stomach, his good hand already reaching for the wound, assessing damage through touch and instinct. Blood, yes, a lot of it, soaking through his uniform, but no arterial spray. No bone fragments grating under his fingers. Painful, yes. Serious, maybe. Immediately life-threatening, probably not. He applies pressure to his own wound with one hand, a field dressing pulled from his webbing, wadded against the entry hole, and keeps firing with the other. His offhand now, non-dominant side. Accuracy reduced, but still functional. No drama, no speeches. No calling for a medic because they don't have a medic. Just 6 riflemen who've all been through basic first aid training. Just grim, matter-of-fact continuation. Just the job. The others know without speaking. If they break, if they run, they all die. The wounded man most of all. If they stay disciplined, stay professional, maybe they all make it. Maybe. One of the other soldiers, the jackaroo, the one who'd spent years working cattle in Queensland, low crawls over during a brief lull in fire, checks the wound, applies a proper pressure dressing, doesn't waste words. A nod, a hand on the shoulder. Back to position. The wounded man props himself against a tree trunk, finding an angle that supports his weight and lets him maintain a firing position. The pain is extraordinary, a white-hot burning that radiates down his arm and up into his neck, but pain is just information. Pain tells you you're injured. It doesn't tell you to stop. He controls his breathing, forces himself to think through the haze of shock and adrenaline. Sight picture, target, breathe, squeeze. The radio comes alive for 5 seconds, fragments of words through static, a voice they recognize but can't quite understand. Then, nothing. They try again. One of the soldiers keys the handset, speaks as clearly as he can over the background noise of gunfire. Position, situation, request immediate support. The response is broken. Words emerging from noise, like debris floating to the surface of water. Copy. Inbound. 20. Then static. They realize help might be 20 minutes away, maybe more, maybe less. No way to know for certain. They need to survive that long, and ammunition is becoming a problem. Half magazines now. Each soldier does the mental arithmetic, calculating what remains, what's been expended, how much longer they can maintain this rate of fire. The answer is not encouraging. Switching to semi-automatic, single shots only, the L1A1 has a selector switch, automatic or semi-auto. Automatic is useful in very specific circumstances, usually close-range ambushes where volume of fire matters more than accuracy. This is not one of those circumstances. Single shots. Make them count. 1 round, 1 target. One soldier, the steel mill worker from Newcastle, notices a dead VC fighter at the edge of their perimeter, maybe 15 meters out. The body is sprawled in a drainage ditch, partially concealed by vegetation. But more importantly, the body has webbing, and webbing means magazines. During a lull in fire, the VC pulling back slightly, regrouping, preparing for another push, he makes a decision, tells the others with a hand signal what he's doing. They nod, provide cover. He crawls forward, low, slow, using every scrap of cover. The dead VC fighter is young, maybe 19 or 20. His eyes are open. There's no time for reflection on this, no time for philosophy or regret, just necessity. The soldier strips the webbing, finds 3 magazines for an AK-47. Wrong caliber. Useless. But there's also a canvas bag with Chinese markings. He opens it. Hand grenades. Chinese stick grenades. The kind with a pull-cord igniter. He takes them all. 4 grenades. Better than nothing. The crawl back is worse because now he's carrying extra weight, and the VC have spotted the movement. Rounds crack past. One hits the ground inches from his leg, throwing up mud. Another clips a branch above him. He doesn't rush. Rushing means rising up, and rising up means dying. He crawls methodically, professionally, while his mates provide covering fire. Reaches their perimeter, rolls behind a tree. Safe. For now. He distributes the grenades. One each for 4 men. The wounded soldier waves his off he can't throw properly with his injury. The grenades are heavy, awkward, unfamiliar. They're used to the Australian issue grenades, which have a different weight and different fusing. But explosives are explosives, and right now they'll take anything that might even the odds. They do the math. 2 full magazines each, maybe 3 or 4 minutes of sustained fire left at best. After that, they're down to grenades and whatever they can scavenge. After that, bayonets. After that, nothing. But a lot can happen in 3 minutes. The VC attempt a flanking maneuver standard tactics. Textbook infantry assault. Fix the enemy with fire from the front. Maneuver elements around the flanks. Close in for the kill. It's worked 1,000 times before. Should work now. This is the most dangerous moment. The Australians are watching the front, where the heaviest fire is coming from. If the VC get behind them, if they achieve envelopment, this ends badly. Very badly. They'll be taking fire from 3 sides simultaneously. Any cover they have becomes worse than useless, and there's no withdrawal route. But the Australians see it coming before it fully develops. Not through any technological advantage, not through radio intercepts or aerial surveillance, but through instinct, formed from years in the bush, hunting, tracking, reading terrain the way some men read newspapers. The jackaroo notices it first, a change in the pattern of fire from the front, slightly less intense, slightly less aggressive. Classic suppression fire, meant to keep them focused forward, while the real threat develops elsewhere. And a sound, faint but distinct, under the crackle of gunfire, movement through undergrowth to their left. Not the random noise of wind or animals, but the purposeful sound of men trying to move quietly and not quite succeeding. He signals. The others understand immediately. 3 VC break from cover, 30 meters to the left, low and fast, professional infantry movement through difficult terrain. They're flanking, trying to get parallel to the Australian position, or maybe even behind it. They're good. They're doing everything right. The Australians pivot as 1. 3 rifles swing to the left side. The other 2 maintain watch on the front, in case this is a feint. No discussion. They've trained for this. Short, explosive bursts, controlled, precise, economical. The first VC goes down immediately, caught mid-stride by rounds that hit center mass, and drop him like a switch has been flipped. The second stumbles into the open, loses his balance as rounds impact around him, tries to fall back, tries to find cover, doesn't make it, goes down hard. The third VC has better instincts or better luck. He vanishes into the undergrowth, diving for cover, presenting no target. He's still out there somewhere, still a threat. But the flanking attempt has been broken. Momentum shifts. The VC pull back slightly, regrouping, reassessing. They're confused now, rattled. The flanking maneuver should have worked. 6 men shouldn't be able to see it coming and counter it effectively. 6 men shouldn't be able to maintain fire discipline this tight under this much pressure. 6 men shouldn't have held this long. And then, in the distance, faint but unmistakable, the sound of helicopter blades chopping air. The distinctive turbine roar of an Iroquois, probably more than one. The wop-wop-wop rhythm that every soldier in Vietnam knows instantly. The VC hear it too. The fire slackens. They begin withdrawing, moving back into the jungle in pairs and small groups, covering each other professionally. Not panicking, but not staying either. They're not retreating entirely, just far enough to avoid the inevitable response when those helicopters arrive with reinforcements, gunships, maybe even artillery support. The Australians stay down, fingers still on triggers, eyes still scanning. They don't relax. Not yet. Not until they see friendly faces. When the relief force arrives, the contrast is staggering. The jungle falls silent except for the ringing in their ears. A high, thin whine that won't stop for hours, maybe days. Tinnitus from sustained exposure to gunfire. The sound of damage being done to the delicate structures of the inner ear. The smell hangs in the humid air like incense. Burnt foliage, expended ammunition, cordite, gun oil, blood, mud. And underneath it all, the eternal smell of the jungle itself. Rot and growth, happening simultaneously. Life and death in the same breath. Hands shake as cigarettes are lit. Not from fear, the fear is already receding, the adrenaline starting to ebb, but from exhaustion and the simple physical aftermath of sustained combat. Fine motor control goes to hell when you've been operating on pure survival instinct for 40 minutes. The 6 men stand slowly. One limps, favoring his left leg not wounded, just cramped from being in firing position for so long. Another has blood soaked through his uniform, dark and wet, but he's moving under his own power. The others are upright, filthy, drenched in sweat and mud, but functional. A helicopter circles overhead, door gunners watching the tree line. 2 more touch down in a clearing 100 meters away, rotor wash flattening the grass, raising clouds of red dust. Soldiers pour out reinforcements, medics, officers. The after-action assessment comes in over the following hours as the area is secured and swept. Body count. Weapon recovery. Evidence collection. The VC company suffered heavy casualties, at least 15 confirmed dead in the immediate area. Blood trails suggesting many more wounded who were carried away during the withdrawal. Weapons recovered. 7 AK-47 seconds, 2 RPD machine guns, 1 RPG launcher, various grenades and equipment. The blood trails head northeast, back toward known VC base areas. Intelligence officers will later estimate total VC casualties somewhere between 25 and 35, based on intercepted radio traffic and local informant reports. The exact number will never be confirmed. Guerrilla forces don't leave detailed casualty reports. The VC company was forced into full withdrawal, their movement south disrupted, their timeline compromised, their confidence shaken. They'd expected an easy victory. They'd gotten a bloody nose and a lesson in why you don't underestimate the Australians. The Australian casualties. 6 men engaged, 1 wounded. Seriously enough for immediate evacuation. He'll spend 3 weeks in hospital, undergo surgery to repair muscle damage, and return to his unit with a scar and a story. The other 5 are bruised, dehydrated, exhausted, and still operational. Minor cuts and abrasions, hearing damage, nothing that won't heal. When the officers arrive to debrief, they're stunned. The company commander, a major who's seen combat before, who understands tactical realities, walks the perimeter, looks at the firing positions, examines the evidence. 6 men held this position. 6 men turned back a company-sized assault. The mathematics of it don't make sense. What these 6 accomplished defies standard tactical doctrine. Infantry combat is about ratios, firepower, numbers, positioning. A standard rule of thumb says you need 3-to-1 advantage to successfully assault a prepared position. The VC had 15-to-1, maybe worse. They had surprise, local knowledge, experience. They should have won. But doctrine doesn't account for everything. It doesn't account for training so thorough it becomes reflex. It doesn't account for discipline that holds when everything else falls apart. It doesn't account for mateship, the absolute refusal to let your mates down, even when every rational calculation says you should run. One of the soldiers, the mechanic from the garage, lights another cigarette. His 3rd since the fighting stopped. His hands are still trembling slightly, adrenaline still working its way out of his system. An officer, a captain he doesn't recognize, approaches and asks the question everyone wants answered. How did you hold? The soldier takes a drag, exhales smoke, looks at the officer with eyes that seem older than they did this morning. Yeah, we got the job done. That's all. No embellishment, no bravado, no detailed tactical analysis, or heroic speeches. Australian understatement at its finest, that cultural reflex toward modesty that treats extraordinary achievement as merely ordinary work done properly. But this firefight doesn't fade into obscurity the way so many small unit actions do, lost in the larger narrative of the war. It becomes part of regimental history, documented, studied in training, referenced in doctrine manuals, held up as proof of what discipline and training can achieve against impossible odds. It's taught at officer training schools. This is what happens when you train properly. This is what small unit tactics can accomplish. This is why fire discipline matters. This is why movement drills matter. This is why we drill these things until they're automatic. It's told in battalion bars, in RSL clubs back home, wherever veterans gather. The details get refined. The timeline gets clearer, but the core truth remains. 6 Australians held off a VC company for 38 minutes and walked away. It embodies the Australian military ethos, mateship, tactical excellence, and an absolute refusal to yield. The cultural inheritance of a nation that's always punched above its weight, that's always had to make do with less and make it count for more. The tradition of small professional units achieving results that larger forces couldn't match. For the men who were there, it's simpler. They don't think of themselves as heroes. Heroes are people in movies, people who do things that ordinary men can't do. They're not heroes. They're just soldiers who did what soldiers do, the job when it needed doing, with the resources they had, alongside the mates who depended on them. They did what they were trained to do. They relied on each other. They held the line when the line should have broken, and when it was over, they walked out, treated their wounded, cleaned their weapons, and got ready for the next patrol. Because that's what soldiers do. And for the Australian veterans watching this now, men who served in Vietnam, who understand intimately what that heat felt like, what that fear tasted like, what it meant to be far from home in a war that didn't always make sense. This story is a reminder of something important. Your generation set a standard few can match. You did things ordinary men aren't supposed to be able to do. You served with professionalism and courage in difficult circumstances. You looked after your mates when it mattered most. And history remembers, even when the recognition came late. Even when the homecoming wasn't what it should have been. The 6 soldiers walked out of that rubber plantation under their own power, exhausted, filthy, some wounded, all alive. And they carried with them a truth the enemy learned that day, a truth written in blood and cordite and empty brass casings scattered across a jungle floor. You don't bet against the Australians, not 6 of them, not 1 of them, not ever. Because when it comes down to it, when everything else has been stripped away, the politics, the strategy, the grand narratives of Cold War conflict, what remains is simpler. Soldiers doing impossible things because their mates need them to. Ordinary men achieving extraordinary results through training, discipline, and the absolute refusal to quit. That's the story. That's the truth. That's what happened in a rubber plantation in Phuoc Tuy province in May 1967. 6 Australians, surrounded, outnumbered 15 to 1, and they held.